Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wa sallallahu wa sallam ala Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Allahumma la ilma lana illa ma 'allamtana innaka antal alimul hakim. Allahumma 'allimna ma yanfa'una wa nafa'na bima tu'allimna wa zidna min fadlika ilman wa ta'liman innaka ala kulli shay'in qadir. Rabbana atina min ladunka rahmatan wa hayyi' lana min amrina rashada. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So we are continuing our discussion on Surah Al-Kahf today, and inshallah we'll cover the next two stories. Yesterday we covered the story of the cave, the youth in the cave, and we looked at the Fataya, that's uh, the youth, as they are mentioned. And we said yesterday that they are not necessarily young in age. Futu means a spiritual excellence. So it's a state of being. So it can mean, it can also mean being in this world but not of this world, uh, being present in this world and not being possessed by this world. So there's two ways that people operate in this world. We either operate by what we have, we define ourselves by what we have, or we define ourselves as being. Now, those people who define themselves by what they have, um, they they identify with the money that they make, the career that they're in, the status that they have, the house they live in, the car they drive, all of these things. And those people who define themselves with um, what they are is a state of being. So these people, they just are. They are. The things do not define them, because even if they have the things, they hold them in their hand, but they don't hold it in their heart. So these are very different people. And even if these things were to be taken away from them, it wouldn't affect them a great deal. Whereas if the people who define themselves with the things, I am this and I am that, if those things were taken away from them, then they would have a very big problem with it. So we have to be believers, right? We don't have to uh, that like being believers is a state of uh, being, whereas I am a Muslim is different. And we talked about this earlier on as well, the difference between being somebody who is a Muslim who accepts it, but they don't practice it. Whereas a mu'min, a believer, is somebody who totally takes this on and they practice it. So this was a definition of the people in the cave. And yesterday we went into the cave and we looked at the people of the cave, and really Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is inviting us with all these symbols in the Quran to get close to him, to get into the cave and to worship him, to turn our hearts to him, and to really kind of be resurrected with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to do fana of everything of the world and to be resurrected with Allah. So this concept of the cave is very important, and this story is very, very important to us. And just a quick mention to Qiyam al-Layl, staying up at nights, because this is related to that as well, that this is a very important practice for believers as well, that we spend a part of the night in worship. And the Prophet ﷺ would do this every night before the Fajr prayer, in the last third of the night, and it would be almost 2 hours. So 2 hours of the 24-hour cycle. So 24 hours in the day and the night. And if we do a twelfth of that, it's 2 hours. So Prophet ﷺ would spend about 2 hours of the night praying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it would be a retreat. And there's a lot of fadail of this in our deen, that the night is clear, our hearts are still, they are clear, and in this time Allah gives in this khalwa. Khalwa means aloneness with Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives a lot. So this is a good time, a good practice to start doing in Ramadan as well. And really what Qiyam al-Layl is, you come out of the busyness of the day, you're coming out of the projection of who you are, because you leave everything behind. Whatever you are during the day, whatever defines you during the day, you leave it behind, and you come into the stillness, into the presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And in that moment, when we are still, we can reflect on the self of the soul. We come into the presence of our own self first. So whatever that is, we have to confront it. And when we make friends with our own self, and we start cleaning ourselves and are cleaning our vessel, then we get to know ourselves. And if we know ourselves, then we can know Allah. Because when we know ourselves, we will know Allah. The self knowledge is very important. And we've touched on that before as well. So this khalwa, this idea of the cave, is very, very important. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So we're going to move on today to verse 28. And I mentioned yesterday that all these verses were revealed in Makkah, except for this one verse which was revealed in Medina, which is verse 28, which and I'll read it to you. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. It starts, وَاصْبِرْ نَفْسَكَ مَعَ الَّذِينَ يَدْعُونَ رَبَّهُمْ بِالْغَدَاةِ وَالْعَشِيِّ. And restrain yourself with those. That means wasbir means keep yourself. Restrain yourselves means use your patience, your self-control, and be with those people who seek his pleasure. It means those people who are seeking the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the morning and in the evening. So they're constantly worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this verse is telling us that be with those kind of people. Make these people your friends and spend most of your time with these kind of people. And why is it saying wasbir? Because why is it saying restrain yourself? Because it's not easy. You know, the attractions of the world are calling us more. If you look at your own friends, for example, or members of your family, you want to stay with those people who make you laugh, and who are talking about nice things in the world, and they're bringing colors and noises and joy into your life. You want to be with those kind of people. And these people may seem quite boring or very simple, um, or even isolated. And you might think, well, what, it's hard to spend time with these people. But Allah is saying to spend time with these people who call their Lord morning and evening. Yuriduna wajhahu, and they seeking the pleasure of the Lord, because when they are praying, they are seeking Allah's pleasure. And do not shift your attention from them with the intent of acquiring the adornment of this worldly life. That means don't take your attention away from these people seeking the adornment of this world. And do not obey him whose heart we have made heedless of our remembrance, who pursues his passions and whose affair is transgressing. So this verse is particular to the Prophet ﷺ, specific, but also general to us. And there's a story behind it in the Durrul Manthur. Reports from Sayyidina Salman al-Farsi radiallahu ta'ala anhu, that Uyayna bin Badr and Aqra bin Habis, who were from those whom the Prophet ﷺ gratified for certain reasons. That means the Prophet ﷺ used to give them attention. Once came to the Holy Prophet ﷺ. They told him that they would sit with him and converse only if he sat apart from the poor Sahaba, like Sayyidina Salman and Bilal radiallahu ta'ala anhu, and Abu Dhar. So these were the three mentioned who, because they were very poor at that time in Medina, they were so poor. So they said, these two came to the Prophet ﷺ and they said, we'll talk with you if you don't sit with these people. Why? So that they do not have to smell the stench of their coarse clothing. Because these people were so poor, and they made this excuse that we don't want to sit with poor people because we don't want to smell their stench. And this is snobbery. And, we might think that's so racist and that's so whatever. But this is inherent in human beings, that once human beings start to think that they are better than other people, and that arrogance enters their hearts, then they start to look down on those who are poorer, weaker than them. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is mentioning this verse to us, that it's very important that you stay with people who remember Allah. That means when you choose your people, when you choose your friends, choose who you spend time with, who you associate with. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving us a criteria. that most of the people in the world will gravitate towards those who are better than them, right? Because the idea is that if somebody is better than you, richer than you, stronger than you, then you will get some of that. That influence will rub on you, and you'll look better in their presence. If you go and stand next to them, you will look better. But Allah's criteria is not like that. Allah's criteria is very different, and that's what we've been told in this verse. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in telling the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam as well. Now, these were poor Sahaba whose hair was disheveled, whose skin was parched, and who had only one piece of cloth to clothe themselves with. Upon seeing them, the Holy Prophet ﷺ sat with them and said, "All praise be to Allah who has created within my ummah such people with whom I have been commanded to remain with." So, subhanAllah, this is a message to us as well that we should love the people who are poor and who are weak, who are disheveled, who are sick. These are the people that the Prophet ﷺ told us to love. And Allah is telling um, Allah is telling the Prophet ﷺ to love these people. And the next story that we're going to do is actually related to that. So so that's the second story. The theme of the second story is this, which we've just read right now, about two different types of people. So, verse 29, speak the truth that comes from your Lord. Whomsoever is willing should believe, and whoever is unwilling should remain as a disbeliever. We have surely prepared for the oppressors a fire, the walls of which will encompass them. If they beseech help, they will be helped with water that is like the residue of burnt oil, and will scorch their faces. A terrible drink indeed. Hell is the worst of resting places. So this verse is telling us the truth is apparent. So those who wish to believe should do so, and those who do not wish to believe need not do so, because the disbelievers will be doomed to hell, and hell is real. These are the last 10 days of Ramadan, and this is the third of Ramadan, which is for itqun minan nar. That means freedom from the hellfire. We pray for this dua. This is our dua for this last last 10 days. And so hell is very real, and it's mentioned in the Quran many, many times. Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is mentioned, whenever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions hell in the Quran, most of the time he mentions heaven too, because he wants to show us the contrast. And in one hadith it says, Sayyidina Abu Sa'id al-Khudri narrates from the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that hell has four walls, the length of each being the distance of a 40 years walk. And this is in the Tirmidhi. That's how big hell is. That if you walk for 40 years, even then you like do one wall of hellfire. May Allah protect us all from it. Ameen. Verse 30, as for those who believe and do good deeds, we shall certainly not put to waste the rewards of those whose actions are good. For these people shall have eternal gardens beneath which rivers flow. There they will be adorned with golden bangles and will wear green garments of sundus and istabrak, and they will recline on couches, a fine reward indeed, and the best of resting places. Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned Jannah, the gardens, in many, many places in the Quran. And Jannah literally means gardens, like green gardens with lots of foliage and trees and um, landscaped with flowers and vegetation and fruit trees, and then lakes and streams, on all of these things which are very cooling to the eyes, have been mentioned. And this is why green is associated, the color green is associated with Jannah. Not only will Jannahs be green, and the reason why green is mentioned is because it's very cooling to the eyes. But in this verse, we're told that they will be adorned with green garments. So, first is saying that they will be adorned with golden bangles and will wear green garments. So, bangles are a jewelry that women wear in this world, but in Jannah, men will wear jewelry too. And you'll see in many cultures in the world, men do wear jewelry, but it has been forbidden for them in our Sharia. But in Jannah, they will wear them. And they will wear green garments of sundus and istabrak. And now these are two types of silk. And it's been said that Ibn Kathir says that istabriq is a silk which has a shine and is used for inner garments, and that istabrak will be worn as inner garments in heaven, and sundus will be worn above it. So even the inner garments will be shiny and made out of silk, and then they will wear inner garments which are made out of silk, and outer garments which are made out of silk. And then Allah says at the end of the verse, a fine reward indeed, and the best of resting places. So imagine this will be eternity. Death will be given death in Jannah, and we will live like this in eternity. And one of the things that when we talk about Jannah, and when we're told in the Quran that, um, and this is off topic, but I think it's worth a mention. When we told about Jannah, we always told that we will get this in Jannah if you do this in this world, and there's a direct correlation. So every amal that you do in this world, every deed that you do in this world has a direct correlation in the hereafter. So some of your dhikr might be related to building your house. Some of your dhikr might be related to planting your trees. Some of your zakah might be related to landscaping your gardens. So everything has a correlation. And one of the things that they found, and we're going into science now, that one of the things that we found is that people who have the most success in this world, and they've done lots and lots of studies on this in psychology, and they found that the people who have the most success are those who can defer pleasure. That means, they did some tests like this where they gave a child, they took them into a room and they gave them a sweet, and they said, you can have this right now, but if you don't have it right now, afterwards you can have two of them. And so they found, like, some children, they just wanted to have it right there, but they found some children, when it was explained to them that if they don't have it now, they'll get two afterwards, or they get more afterwards. Many of them chose to have it after. So this is called deferred pleasure. That means you understand that, okay, I can't have it in this world, but I will have it after. And so the people who understand this the most, and who are most willing to do this, to have deferred pleasure, will be the most successful even in this life, because they followed these children into adulthood, and they did many, many studies to see who was most successful, and they found that those children who were disciplined to be able to have deferred pleasure, right, then they will be they are the ones who are the most successful in life too. And so is the same with the believers, that those people who are ready to give up things in this world so that they can have things in Jannah, they will have more in Jannah, because they understand this idea of deferred pleasure. I don't have to have it in this world. I can give it up in this world, and Allah will give it to me in Jannah. Right. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. So verse 32. So, وَضْرِبْ لَهُمْ مَثَلًا رَجُلَيْنِ. So we're starting the second story now in Surah Al-Kahf, and it says, relate to them the analogy of the two men. So the analogy, the example of the two men. We had granted one of them two vineyards surrounded by date palms, and grown a plantation between the two. Both orchards bore fruit, and we did not withhold anything from them. We even caused the river to gush forth amidst the two. He had an abundance of fruit. So I want you to imagine this garden. There were two men, and it's in some tafsir it says that they were brothers. One was rich, one was poor. Now, one of them, the rich one, he has two gardens, and in the middle of his garden he has vineyards. So he has grapes growing. Now, if you've seen grapes growing, they grow closer to the ground. They don't rise that high. So he had all these grapes growing, and then this vineyard was surrounded by date palms, and now you know that date palms go very tall. So these vineyards were protected as well. So imagine, they were protected by these date palms. So he had grapes in the middle, and then he had all these dates on the surrounding these date palms, and then he had and grown a plantation between the two. So there was a plantation um, that was growing between the two of these gardens, because remember, he had two gardens, and both orchards bore fruit. So in these orchards there was so much fruit, and we didn't withhold anything from him. That means we made it all very pleasing to him. There was nothing withhold from this man. And we even caused the river to gush forth. So he didn't even have to worry about the water, because the water was right there. The irrigation of these gardens was right there. He didn't have to worry about any of that. And he had an abundance of fruit. So one day they go into the garden, him and his companion, and while speaking to his companion, verse 34, he said, I have more wealth than you, and my people are dominant. That means I have more wealth, and my people, my family, um, and my household is more dominant than yours. He entered his garden as an oppressor unto himself and said, I do not suppose that this garden has ever been destroyed, and I do not suppose that judgment day, Qiyamah, will ever arrive. If I should ever be returned to my Lord, I shall certainly find a better place to return. So he was in his full arrogance, and he was saying that I don't think this garden will ever end, and I don't think Qiyamah will ever come, Day of Judgment will ever come, and I don't think I'll be returned to my Lord. This is going to go on forever and ever. So you can see that when people go into this zone of arrogance and pride, and Allah, this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tests them in the world. He gives them things and He tests them to see what they're going to do with it. So everything we have in the world is a test. This story is teaching us that. But we see people in the world too, that when they feel their power, Allah gives them things, and suddenly the shaitan will make them feel powerful, and they start to feel the power. Then they start to have these kind of thoughts, and they can relay them. So as they spoke, his companion told him, do you disbelieve in him who has created you, who has created you from, um, do you disbelieve in him who has created you from sand, then from a drop, and then perfected you as a man? But he is my Lord, and I shall not ascribe anyone as partner unto him. So when you enter your garden, why do you rather not say, MashaAllah, la quwwata illa billah? So his brother is telling him that, why are you doing shirk with Allah? Instead, when you come into your garden, why don't you attribute it to Allah? MashaAllah, that Allah gave me this, and there is no strength and power except with Allah. And then he says, if you think that I have less wealth and children than you, then the time is close when my Lord shall grant me better than your garden, and send to your garden a calamity from the sky, turning it into an open plain. Or its water would sink into the depths of the earth, after which you will not be able to even look for it. Right? So his brother gives him dawah, and then he says, if you're saying to me that I have less wealth and children, then a time will come when Allah will give me more in the hereafter. Right? And what if Allah was to give you a calamity? His brother is saying, what if Allah, you're doing so much of arrogance right now, but what if Allah was to give you a calamity from the sky? And what if all the water that is irrigating your garden right now, it was to sink into the earth? What would you do? So then verse 42 says, so his fruit was engulfed by a disaster, and we're told that a great fire came, and this destroyed all of his crops. And he began to wring his hands in lamentation of what he had invested in it. So because he had invested so much of his money and his time in it, so he started to wring his hands. He started to regret everything. The vineyards had collapsed on their trellises. So the grapes, the vineyards, they collapsed. And he said, if only I had not ascribed any partner to my Lord. That means he said, if only I had not done shirk, but it was too late now. He had no troops to assist him against Allah, neither could he avenge himself. At times like this, assistance is only from Allah, the true deity. He is the best for reward and the best in the end. So this story is being told to us, and this analogy of one being wealthy and the other being poor has come to us because it's a very big analogy of people of the world, the rich and the poor, and how they treat each other and their attitudes. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving us this story. And this is a story of our time as well, that the rich just keep getting richer and the poor keep getting poorer, and then they are abused, and nobody looks at them. But here our attention is being drawn to the poor people, right? Okay. And so Ruhul Ma'ani reports from Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Abbas that the two were the sons of a king from the Bani Israel. The one spent his wealth in Allah's path, while the other was a disbeliever. He was a kafir. And these orchards made him extremely wealthy. The other brother was poor, so the wealthy one. That's why he says that I have more than you. And this is also a common narrative in our world too. People who are rich, they'll say we are better because we are rich. And rich people, people who have wealth, maybe they're very rich in wealth, but they're poor inside, right? They are very poor in spirit, but when they are rich in wealth, they start to look down on the people who are poor. And so in this verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is calling our attention to this, right? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is also right, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is also calling our attention to the fact that Allah will make people rich in the hereafter, which is the real riches. Right? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created Sayyidina Adam alayhi salam from sand, and all of mankind stemmed from him by way of the seeds of their fathers. Here, the believer, mu'min, brother also drew the attention of his brother to the fact that he should be thankful to Allah for allowing him to be properly formed at birth, because all children are not so fortunate. Thereafter, he expressed his belief by declaring, "But he is Allah, and I shall not ascribe anyone as partner unto him." So there's so much to be grateful for, which the brother is pointing out to his, which is he's pointing out to his uh, other brother. And then he also says, "Say, MashaAllah, la quwwata illa billah." Only with Allah, what Allah wills shall happen, and there is no might without Allah's help. Allah can take worldly things away in a second. It doesn't take long. In seconds, Allah can take everything away. And so we should be very cognizant of this. We should be very, very aware of this, that everything that we have in this world, it is His, and Allah can take it away whenever He wants to. Right. And verse 45, relate to them the similitude of this worldly life as the rain that we send from the sky, by which the plants of the earth flourish. Thereafter they become debris, to be carried by the winds. Allah always has control over everything. Wealth and sons are merely adornments of this worldly life. The lasting good deeds are the best in the sight of your Lord in terms of reward, and best in terms of expectations. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is bringing our attention to an example of the worldly life, that it's like when the rain comes down and then the plants flourish. And when they're flourishing, we think the earth is so beautiful. Everything is green and is strong. And one plant creates so many other plants. And but then after that, after a while, they become debris. They become rubbish, like straw. Like when we see at the end of fall, everything is gone. Winter comes and everything is gone, and is carried by the winds. That the winds blow the grasses. So Allah has control over everything, and that's what life is like. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is explaining to us that that is what life literally is like. And He's reminding us that wealth and children are just the adornments of this worldly life. They're not anything else. They're not anything that you're going to take into the hereafter. They're just here as a test. And the lasting good deeds are best in the sight of Allah. So the real things of this world are the good deeds that you will do, which are best in the sight of Allah, means which are accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That day when we will cause the mountains to fly, 47. That day when we will cause the mountains to fly, when you will see the earth as an open plain, and we shall resurrect them, not omitting any of them at all. And so this is a reference to the day of judgment. So the mountains will fly, and nothing on the earth will be left open. It will be a plain, it will become a plain piece of land, right? That's why we call it plain, open plain. And we will resurrect everybody. They will be presented before Allah in rows. We have certainly brought you as we have created you the first time, but you deemed that we would never fix an appointment for you. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that everybody will be in rows, and we will be created, we will be brought as we were first created by Allah. And that means shoeless, clothless, and with nothing of this world will be brought in front of Allah. But you deemed that we would never fix an appointment for you. The record of deeds shall be placed, and you will see the sinners afraid of what is contained in them. They will say, so the record of deeds will be opened, and they will say, the sinners will say, they'll be afraid of it. Woe be to us! What is with this book that it does not leave anything small or large unrecorded? They will express surprise because everything in the book of deeds, even the smallest, the tiniest of thoughts, the tiniest of amal, the tiniest of words will be recorded in there. So they'll be saying, whoa, what is this book? Everything is recording. They'll find their deeds present, and your Lord shall not oppress anyone. So this is a reference to the Day of Judgment. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is bringing our attention to that. And the Prophet ﷺ said, Abu Sa'id radiallahu ta'ala narrates that this world is sweet and flourishing. Whoever Allah has placed man as viceroy on earth, however, Allah has placed man as viceroy on this earth and will observe how he behaves. Right? So he's saying that this world is sweet and flourishing. Everything in it is very sweet and flourishing. Is it grows and it multiplies, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made man a khalifa. Khalifa is somebody, a viceroy, representative on this earth, and he will observe how he behaves. Allah is observing every man and woman how we behave. Therefore, guard against the world by not attaching oneself to it. um, so it's saying guard against the world by not attaching yourself to it, and guard against women, the by not and the first dissension that arose among the Bani Israel was over women. And this is a hadith from Muslim that Prophet ﷺ said, guard yourselves against the world by not attaching to it, and guard against women by not attaching yourself to the women, um, so that they lead you astray, or they draw you more into the world, because it is women who will draw more, have want, like, so want the bigger house, the bigger this, the bigger that, want to spread out more. So don't let the women, and it's not true for all women, but it says in this hadith, it's a warning in this hadith that we should guard against that. And the first dissension that rose amongst the Bani Israel was over women. The first ikhtilaf, and this is a reference possibly to the story of Yusuf that we read before. Right, verse 50. When we told the angels prostrate to Adam, they all prostrated except for devil Iblis. He was from the jinn and disobeyed the command of his Lord. Do you take him and his progeny as friends besides me, whereas they are your enemies? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is clearly telling us that Shaitan is the enemy, Iblis is the enemy, and we do need to understand this. We really need to understand the deceptions of the Shaitan and how the Shaitan operates. Evil indeed is a substitution of the oppressors. I have not made them witness to the creation of the heavens and the earth, nor witness to their own creation, and I shall not take those as accomplices who lead others astray. Right? Remember the day when Allah will say, call those whom you ascribe as partners to myself. Then they will call them, but they will not respond, and we shall place a barrier between them. So on the day of judgment, they will call their shayateen that come and help us now, but then the shayateen will not come. The criminals will see the fire and will be certain that they will plunge into it. They will not find anyone to rescue them from it. So Satan, Iblis refuses to prostrate to Adam alayhi salam, and then him and his enemy progenies become become enemies to Shaitan. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is reminding us of the enmity of the Shaitan. And how do we protect ourselves? It is very important to read the Ma'awadatain, the du'as in the morning and the evening. The morning, evening du'as are very important for this protection. If you read the du'as the Prophet ﷺ prescribed in the morning, and you'll be protected all day from the onslaughts of the shayateen, from the onslaughts of your nafs and the hawa and the dunya. And then in the night, if you read the same Ma'awadatain and then the prescribed prayers, then you will be protected. And it's all the more important now to read these du'as. These du'as are going to become very important in the coming days. Verse 54. We have undoubtedly expounded all types of subjects in the Quran for people. Man has always been the worst disputant. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, we've made وَلَقَدْ صَرَّفْنَا فِي هَذَا الْقُرْآنِ لِلنَّاسِ مِنْ كُلِّ مَثَلٍ. Allah saying we've taken all these examples and we've expounded them, we've explained so many things in the Quran. All these subjects are all explained in the Quran. But Allah is saying, that insan, he is a worse disputant. Disputant means that he is jadala. Jadala is a word that he is a fighter, right? He is an arguer. He disputes a lot. So this is one of the characteristics of human beings, that they are disputants, they are fighters. After the arrival of guidance, the only thing that prevented people from believing and seeking forgiveness from their Lord was that the treatment of the previous people should come to them, or that punishment should appear before them. We sent the messengers only as bearers of glad tidings and warners. The disbelievers dispute using falsehood in order to eradicate the truth, and they make a mockery of my verses and the warnings that have been given to them. Who can be more unjust than he who has been advised with the verses of his Lord but ignored them and forgot what he has sent forth? We have certainly placed a veil on their hearts, lest they should understand it, and placed a prop in their ears. In this condition, even if you call them to guidance, they shall never be guided aright. So Allah is saying in these verses that He has put a veil on the hearts of the disbelievers. And so even if you call them and you continue to call them, they won't understand. It is Allah who lifts the veil and gives guidance. So we must pray that Allah gives guidance to all the people. Verse 58, your Lord is the most forgiving, full of mercy. If He were to take them to task for their deeds, He would have speedily afflicted them with punishment. However, they have been promised a term from which they will not find any sanctuary. These are the towns that we have destroyed when they were oppressive, and we have stipulated a term for their destruction. So this is a mention of those people who follow a falsehood and argue against the truth, right? Because man is extremely contentious. Human beings are extremely contentious. Even if the truth comes in front of us, we like to argue about it because we want to. So this is our nature. So that's why Allah is pointing this out about us. Now, verse 60, we're going to start the story of Musa alayhi salam. And it says, وَإِذْ قَالَ مُوسَى لِفَتَاهُ لَا أَبْرَهَ حَتَّى لا أبرح حتى أبلغ مجمع البحرين. So when Musa said to the youngster, I shall continue to walk until I reach the confluence of two seas, or until a long period expires. So let's do a summary of the story of Musa alayhi salam. And it is said, um, it's, the story of Musa and Khidr has been mentioned in the books of Hadith. So there are two central um, stories, characters in the story, Musa and Khidr. And as you know, Musa alayhi salam has been mentioned more than 100, even 130 times in the Quran. That many times Musa alayhi salam has been mentioned. So many aspects of his life have been mentioned in different places, and many times they are repeated. The stories are repeated, but they have different nuances. That means we understand different things from them. So different detail will be put in. So this particular story is told in its entirety, and it is about the story of Musa and Khidr. When Musa alayhi salam, one day he is giving a sermon to the Bani Israel, and I'll read the hadith. It's, it says, Sayyidina Ubay bin Ka'ab reports that the Holy Prophet ﷺ said that once when Musa ﷺ delivered a sermon to the Bani Israel, their eyes filled with tears and their hearts softened. After the sermon, someone asked him whether there was anyone more knowledgeable than him on earth. Right? So they were so affected by the sermon, their hearts had become soft and the tears were streaming from their eyes. And someone stood up and asked Musa alayhi salam, is there anybody on this earth um, who is more knowledgeable than you? Now Musa alayhi salam knew that he was a prophet, and Musa alayhi salam knew that he had Allah's knowledge. So he replied that there was none, right? So he said, no, there's nobody more knowledgeable. Now, according to another narration, he was asked as to who was the most knowledgeable person. He replied that he was. Now, since he did not reply, Allah knows best, right? So because he didn't attribute it to Allah and he attributed it to himself, Allah reproached him and informed him that there is another servant of his, and you will meet him at where the two seas meet, right? There's a point where the two seas meet, and the two seas reference here maybe to the salty and the sweet seas, and you might have seen pictures of this. There's many points on the earth where the two seas, the sweet and the salty water, meet, but they don't become one. So you can literally see with your own eyes one water is a different color and another one is a different color. One is sweet and one is salty, but they don't mix. And the nature of water is to mix. This is a miracle of Allah, because if you put two different waters in a glass, you'll see that they both mix, right? They'll both go into one another. But these two seas, they don't meet. The sweet and the salty don't meet. So it's possible that this is the reference to that. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that you will meet this servant um, at this point, and he is he was more knowledgeable than himself, meaning Musa alayhi salam. So Musa alayhi salam expressed the desire to meet this person, and asked Allah how he would recognize him. So Allah told Musa alayhi salam to carry a fish with him in a basket. The fish would be given life at a place where he would meet this person. So Musa alayhi salam set out with the fish and his servant with the name of Yusha bin Nun. And he instructed Sayyidina Yusha bin Nun to inform him when the fish came to life. Now Sayyidina Yusha told him that this was an extremely simple task and well within his capability. That means that was easy. As soon as the fish came alive, he would tell him. Right? So they traveled throughout that day and night. Thereafter, they came to a boulder where they rested and slept. As they slept, the fish came to life, escaped from the basket, and swam out into the sea. Allah created a shelf in the sea for the fish, which was an extremely wondrous sight for Yusha bin Nun. That means Allah made a shelf and He put the fish in the shelf so that Yusha could see from the shore where the fish was. So the fish didn't go into the ocean and disappear into the ocean as would be normal, but Allah created a shelf so that Yusha bin Nun could see it. And this was a wondrous sight. Right. So they later proceeded further, but Yusha alayhi salam forgot to mention the incident to Musa alayhi salam. So when the morning of the following day dawned, Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam told the youngster, "Bring our breakfast without doubt. Without doubt, this journey has been extremely wearisome for us." So Yusha alayhi salam replied, "Did I not tell you that when we sought shelter by the boulder, I forgot the fish? It was certainly from Shaitan that made me forget the fish. It made its way into the sea in an extremely marvelous way." So it was certainly a Shaitan who made him forget. And then, however, after informing him, Musa alayhi salam said, "That was the place we were seeking." Right? So that's exactly the point where we need to go back, because that's where we're going to meet Khidr. So let's go to the verses and read the verses. So it says, verse 60, when Musa said to the youngster, so this was Yusha bin Nun who was traveling with him, "I shall continue to walk until I reach the confluence of the two seas, or until a long period expires." That means I'm going to carry on walking. And we learn from this that when we go out to seek knowledge, then we should not be afraid. Number one, we shouldn't be afraid. Number two, that even if we have to walk long distances or we have to exert lots of effort, then we should do so. Because by Musa alayhi salam saying that a long period expires, in the Mufassirin have said that long period, this word can mean a year, it can mean several years. So Musa alayhi salam is ready to go out on a limb for several years until he meets this person who's going to teach him. Verse 61. So when they reached the confluence of the two, they both forgot their fish, and it tunnels its path into the ocean. And we just read from the hadith how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created a miracle, and Yusha bin Nun saw it with his own eyes, how in a beautiful way the fish became alive. And he said the fish was salted. That means it was ready to be eaten. Right? It was a salted fish, and yet Allah made it come to life, and it made its way into the ocean. So when they proceeded further, Musa alayhi salam told the youngster, "Bring our breakfast. Without doubt, this journey has been extremely wearisome for us." So we learn from this um, that they had been traveling for a long time, and but in the morning, the Musa alayhi salam asked for his breakfast. So uh, we've been told in the hadith that it is good when you travel to take a companion with you, that we should not travel on our own. It's not good to travel on your own. Um, right. We'll come to the hadiths later. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. And so he said, verse 63, he replied, did I not tell you that when we sought shelter in the boulder, I forgot the fish? It was certainly shaitan that made me forget the fish. That means the sight was so miraculous for Yusha bin Nun that he normally he should have remembered it, right? It was so he would have related it because it was something like he'd never seen in his life, that Allah made a shelf in the ocean and then the fish went and into that shelf and he could see it. But it was because Musa alayhi salam was sleeping and he didn't want to disturb him that he didn't tell him at that time. And then when they resumed their journey, he had by that time he had forgotten, and so he said, "The shaitan made me forget." So it's made its way into the sea in an extremely marvelous way. We also learn from this that the shaitan will make us forget important things. When we forget something, we should pray "A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim," or we should pray the salawat on the Prophet ﷺ. This is tried and tested. That if you read durood, salawat on the Prophet ﷺ, if you've lost something, you've forgotten something, it will come back to you. And the effect of the salawat, reading the durood on the Prophet ﷺ, is this, that it instantly brings rahmah on you. Right? 10 rahmahs come down, like the rahmah starts coming down, the mercy of Allah starts coming down on you. So anytime you're in a situation where you need Allah's mercy, you should start reading salawat on the Prophet ﷺ. That's why salawat is very, very powerful. Verse 64, Musa alayhi salam said, that was what we were seeking. So he said, uh, that's exactly what we were looking for. That was our point. That was our um, nishani. We have to look at this. So they retraced their steps back. And we see from this, Musa alayhi salam did not reprimand him. He was his traveling companion, his servant, but he didn't say, "Oh, why didn't you tell me before?" He didn't get angry, even though Musa alayhi salam was a person who was prone to more anger than other people, but he didn't. He just said that, "Oh, that's exactly what we were looking for," and so they retraced their steps. 65. Then they found a slave of ours whom we had granted mercy, especially from ourselves, and to whom we had given our special knowledge. So they found a slave whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given his mercy to, and that was Khidr alayhi salam, and to whom we had given our special knowledge. And it is said that when they found Khidr alayhi salam, he was on the water, fully clothed, and he was lying down on the water. Subhanallah. What a sight that must have been. Right? So they see Khidr alayhi salam, and Khidr alayhi salam says, "Who are you?" So he says that I am Musa. So then Khidr alayhi salam asks that, "Are you the same Musa who has come to the Bani Israel?" So he says, "Yes, I am." So he asks him, "Why have you come?" So he says, "Allah has told me that you have a knowledge that I don't have, and so I would like to learn from you." Right? So Musa alayhi salam said to him, "May I follow you on condition that you teach me some of the special knowledge that has been taught to you?" So from this we learn that you can ask a teacher to teach you knowledge. He replied, "You will surely not be able to bear with me. So how can you possibly bear with something the knowledge of which you have not encompassed?" So the teacher says that you can't bear with this knowledge because you don't know this knowledge, so you won't be able to be patient with it. But Musa alayhi salam replied, "Inshallah, you shall find me to be patient, and I shall not disobey any command of yours." So Musa alayhi salam says, "No, I will be patient." So first, the teacher is putting forth his conditions that you don't have the requirements to learn this knowledge. But then Musa alayhi salam is saying, "No, no, I will fulfill the requirements. Just take me as your student." So he said, "If you must follow me, then you do not ask me about anything until I make mention of it myself." So Khidr says, "This is my condition." So he lays down his condition and he says, "You cannot ask me if you see something, and you cannot ask me what's this and what's that. You just have to observe." 71. So they proceeded until they boarded a boat, and he made a hole in it. So they were traveling, and so they come to a ferry, and these people they knew Khidr alayhi salam, they knew Musa alayhi salam, so they give them a free ride. But what Khidr does is that he makes a hole in a boat. So Musa alayhi salam exclaimed Have you made a hole to drown the people of the boat? You have certainly perpetrated a grave act. He said, did I not say to you that you will be unable to bear with me? Khidr says, look, did I tell you that you won't be able to bear with me? Musa said, do not take me to task for what I have forgotten, and do not be harsh with me in matters. Musa says, please forgive me. I forgot. Okay, I won't say anything. So 74. So they proceeded until they met a boy whom he killed. So the next test was even greater because they met a boy who was playing. And it says in the hadith that Khidr went behind him and he killed him. So Musa burst out, have you killed an innocent soul that has not taken another soul? You have now surely perpetrated a great wrong. So Musa says, now he's saying, now this is too much because you just killed somebody. First it was a boat, and that was a boat. It was inanimate. Now this is a soul. You just killed somebody. So 75, he said, did I not tell you that you will not be able to bear with me? So Musa said, if I question you about anything after this, then you need not remain with me. You have received an excuse from me. So Musa says, okay, last warning, give me one more chance. And if I say anything now, then I don't have to stay with you. So they proceeded until they came across the people of a town with whom they asked for food, but the people refused to host them. Then they found a wall in the town that was on the point of collapse, and he straightened it. So what happens is that they're so hungry and they're traveling, and they come to a town and they ask for hospitality, they ask for some food, but these people refuse to give them food. And so Musa says, and then they go to the outskirts they leave the town and they go to the outskirts, and they find there's a wall there. Now they're hungry and they're traveling, and Khidr says, we have to stop here. And what he starts to do is he starts to rebuild this broken wall. So Musa says to him, if you had wished, you could have taken payment for this. Musa says, you're rebuilding these people's wall for free, and if you wanted, you could have taken money and we could have bought some food from it. So Khidr says, this is the parting between us. He says, okay, last chance, it's up now. You've used up all your chances. He says, you're going to part. But before you go, I shall inform you of the interpretation of the incidents which you could not bear with patience. So then Khidr says, okay, now we have to part ways, but before you go, I'm going to tell you what all this was about. Right. So, verse 79, as for the boat, it belonged to a few poor persons who worked by the sea. I wished to damage it because there was a king ahead of them who forcefully seized possession of every boat. So Khidr explains to Musa the reason I damaged the boat is because there was a king where we were going. There's a king, and he would take all of all the good boats. That means he would just seize them, and these were poor fishermen. So if their boat was good, then the king would have taken their means of livelihood, and I wanted that their livelihood would have stayed with these poor fishermen. That's why I made a defect in it. So when the king saw it, then he wouldn't take their boat. So now it made perfect sense to Musa alayhi salam. Verse 80. As for the boy, both his parents were believers, so we feared that he would embroil them in rebellion and disbelief. And so, verse 80, it says that the boy, both his parents were believers, and we feared that when this boy grew up, he would put them in rebellion, and he would make them turn away for which they from beliefs for which they would have eternal damnation. I mean, eternally they would be in Jahannam. And so I kill this boy, and in his place, Allah will give them another righteous child. And verse 81, we intended for their Lord replace for them children who are better than he in purity and affection. And it is said that they had a righteous girl. So in this verse in the Quran, Allah says that your Lord intended that he give them better children who are better in purity and affection. Allah gave them a girl, one girl, and she was the mother of so many prophets. Subhanallah. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala replaced this boy by giving them a girl. So Allah, in Allah's wisdom, see, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is showing his wisdom, that in his wisdom, something that looks like us, to us, as very detrimental, maybe something very great. So we are told to look with the eyes of Basira. Allah is pointing us in this surah to keep looking with the eyes with our eyes of the inner heart. Verse 82. As for the wall, it belonged to two orphaned boys in the town. Beneath it was their treasure, and their father was a pious person. So their Lord intended that they come of age and excavate their treasure. This is the mercy of your Lord. I did not carry out these actions of my own accord. This is the interpretation of things that you could not bear with patience. So the third one, the third incident where he starts to rebuild the wall, even though he's hungry and thirsty and they hadn't got any hospitality from those people, they're doing them a favor. He's saying that the underneath the wall was a treasure, and it belonged to two orphans. And had the wall fallen down, then the people would have taken their treasure, and it wouldn't have reached these boys when they grew older. And so he was doing a favor to the boys that they should get their inheritance when they grow older. So this was then Khidr alayhi salam shows a ta'wil to Musa alayhi salam. And he says, I did not carry out these commands of my own accord. So Allah commanded me all the actions. So in the end, he tells him as well that I didn't just choose to do these things. I didn't choose to kill the boy and make a hole in the boat and rebuild that wall. It was Allah who had told me to do these things. Finally, he said to Musa alayhi salam, this is the interpretation of the things that you could not bear with patience. So many times in the world, a very big lesson here, that we see things and it looks detrimental to us, but for Allah it is something else. And that's why we should not judge. We shouldn't judge people. We shouldn't judge incidents. We shouldn't judge things that happen, because we're very quick to judge things and then we make a big story out of it. And we're very, very quick at doing that. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, look with the eyes of basira and do not be quick to judge things. Right. So there are actually over 50 lessons that come out of just this one story. And there's so much to learn from it. Like if you look at every part and every word of the story, there are lessons. And I'm just going to go over some of them. One thing is, it's preferable not to travel alone, right? There are many servants, many Sahaba radiallahu anhu who served the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the most famous of these was Sayyidina Anas radiallahu anhu. Now, Anas radiallahu anhu traveled with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he stayed in his company for 9 years, right? So he was a Sahaba, but he was also a servant to our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So it is permissible to do this in order to learn, in order to benefit from the sohbah of somebody, to stay in their company. And certainly for traveling, it's not good to travel on your own, and certainly for women, they shouldn't travel on their own. Even men, they should not travel long distances. It's not good for them to travel on their own. Right. We also learn a lot about knowledge and the relationship between the teacher and the student. That's a very important relationship. And traveling for knowledge and respect for the teacher, and also going to great lengths to get knowledge. Like some of the Sahabas, they would travel for long distances to get knowledge. So this is something else that we learn from here too. Right. And also we learn that there's always somebody more knowledgeable than ourselves. And we've done this verse before, that there's always somebody who will have more knowledge, and we should try to learn from them. Right. The word Khidr means green. Now, Khidr, some people say that he was a prophet. Some people say that he wasn't a prophet. And there's many legends surrounding Khidr alayhi salam. Some people even said that he lived during the lifetime of the Prophet ﷺ. There's great debates in the books of tafsir of whether he met the Prophet ﷺ or he was around at his time. But they are debates. They are just that, because we don't know the full truth of things. But he's called Khidr, and the reason I'm mentioning that is because Khidr means green and lush. It's in Arabic, Khidr means green, right? So the Prophet ﷺ mentioned that Khidr got his name because he once sat on a dry and barren piece of ground, and where after it became green and lush. So in Bukhari, this hadith is mentioned that he sat on a ground and it was dry and barren, and it said that it became green and lush, and maybe wherever he would go, things would become green and lush. And maybe that's why people think that he is living today because it's evergreen. Evergreen is something that lives. But again, these are debates of the Mufassirin. And then the confluence of the two uh, seas mentioned in the tafsir is the Persian Sea and the Roman Sea. And it's mentioned that the fish that was taken was salted. That means it's preserved fish. It's not even fish that can be revived, because you know that certain fishes, even if you put them on ice and you take them out of ice, they can become alive again. So some fish have that quality. They could switch their hearts on and off. So it wasn't even that kind of a fish. It was salted. That means it had gone to that level that it had been totally dehydrated. And so this this tells us that it was a miracle, and also that when we travel, that we should take our provisions with us. That it's part of tawakkul to take the provisions with you. Right. So we also learn that it's people are bound to err, and that we should not rebuke them, like Musa alayhi salam did not rebuke Yusha bin Nun. That means have patience with people, and this is especially true for children. You know, when they drop things, they do things, they forget. Then we should have a lot of patience uh, with people. This is something that we need to develop. And Prophet ﷺ was the most patient with children. So this is for all parents. I know sometimes it gets very difficult, and we have to clean up the messes, and or we're trying to train them, but training in the if you're a parent with young children, or even teenage children, go back and look at the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ of how he dealt with children, and it's so beautiful. You'll be amazed by how he did the tarbiyah of children. Right. So a lot is said about the teacher-student relationship. So to lay down conditions for your students is also permissible. Like Khidr alayhi salam lay down the condition that he should not ask questions because he won't understand it. He doesn't have the level to understand it yet. So that is a good way um, to have clarity between the teacher and the student. Right. Uh, Before the student leaves the teacher, this is an important point. There should be clarity so that the the student doesn't go and backbite the teacher, right? So that things should be made clear in a relationship. This is not just teacher-student relationship, but even within friends, within neighbors, that there should be clarity in things so that it doesn't result in backbiting. Like if something happens, then you should explain it to the level that that person doesn't go away, but then they have bad ideas in their head and they start backbiting about it. It's also permissible to get remunerated for one's labor, like Musa alayhi salam told Khidr that they should ask for money. Um, it's haram to usurp other people's property. We know that. That it's also good sunnah to treat the children of pious people well, right? Like Khidr alayhi salam, he rebuilt the wall for these children, right? And then how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala replaces, sometimes he takes something away and he replaces it by better things. And it said that uh, the girl that was replaced for those parents, she became an extremely pious daughter. And in a narration of Nasai, it says that the daughter was the mother of a prophet, and from him came so many prophets, right? So this, I'm going to wrap up here. There's too many lessons, but inshallah, I hope it inspires you to read this surah every Friday. with a translation and trying to understand what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us and all the lessons that are coming from there. So this story of Musa and Khidr is about knowledge and the tests of knowledge and the apparent knowledges and the hidden knowledges and Allah's knowledge and our knowledge. And I don't know if you remember in the first session I told you about at their parting, there's a point in this story where Musa alayhi salam and Khidr alayhi salam, they come to the water, and Khidr alayhi salam says, one drop is my knowledge and one drop is your knowledge and the rest is Allah's knowledge. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has boundless knowledge, infinite knowledge. And so that's why we put our tawakkul on Allah when things happen as well. There's a direct correlation in this story that we're being taught, that when things happen in the world, we have to trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have to put our tawakkul in Allah, because we can't see everything. We are very tunnel vision, right? We have periphery vision. We can't even see as well as a rabbit. Rabbits can see behind them as well to a certain point. We can't even see that. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees everything. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is as-sami wal basir. And so we have to put our tawakkul in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so we're going to end here with this story, and inshallah we will continue with the last story of this tomorrow, inshallah. So these are the last 10 nights, or the great nights, and we talked a little bit about Qiyam al-Layl. So try to do the Qiyam. Qiyam just means staying a while, right? So stay a while in the night and pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us a portion. Allah give me and you a portion of nightly ibadah. Allah give us a portion of the Quran, understanding of the Quran, the wisdom of the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us portions of worship, um, bodily worship, heart worship, financial worship, practical worship, social worship. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us worship that is accepted in His court. Ameen. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala illuminates our hearts so that we can see the reality of these things, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.